On February 22nd, me and Ashley decided to make a day trip to Shreveport, Louisiana. Ashley had read about Oakland Cemetery online, and we decided we wanted to go visit the cemetery that had so much history. When Shreveport was first laid out in 1836, the need for a cemetery was among the first considerations of the Shrevetown Company. The first cemetery was known as Fannin Street Cemetery. Its use began almost as soon as the town came into being. Shreveport in the 1830s was an exceedingly inhospitable place with a lot of rough pioneers and little law enforcement. The combination proved a fertile one for the Grim Reaper, and within only a decade of its establishment, the cemetery was filled nearly to capacity. On March 30th, 1847, a much larger city cemetery was established on 10 acres located 2 blocks west of Common Street on what was then the very edge of the city. This new cemetery opened shortly after the land for it was acquired from Mary Bennett Kane and her father, Dr. Samuel Bennett. Burials officially ceased in the Fannin Street Cemetery in 1851, and following the Civil War, it was decreed by City Hall that all graves in the Fannin Street Cemetery be moved to the new city cemetery. City Cemetery was renamed Oakland Cemetery around 1905 and is now the city's oldest and arguably most important landmark. Very few burials have taken place at Oakland Cemetery in the last 70 years. No more plots are sold at Oakland, as all of the space in the cemetery was purchased long ago. The cemetery is owned and maintained by the city, but the grave plots are owned by the families of those buried there. Even the ground, which appears empty, is an illusion, for there are many unmarked graves at Oakland Cemetery, and there are, therefore, very few spaces for new graves to be dug. It is believed that there are nearly as many unmarked graves here as marked ones. About 800 victims of the Great Yellow Fever epidemic of 1873 are buried at Oakland, most in a marked mass grave near the Milam Street side of the cemetery. Victims of other yellow fever epidemics, 1853, 1858, and 1867, are also buried here. Shreveport's first Jewish cemetery, which opened in 1858, is also found here at Oakland. 1 acre in the north corner of the 10 here present was purchased by the Hebrew Mutual Benevolent Association. Many pioneer merchants and other businessmen can be found commemorated here. Overall, the cemetery is the final resting place of thousands of ordinary citizens, white and black, Christian and Jew, free and slave, native and foreign-born. Shreveport is their legacy. From their last resting place can be seen the skyline of Shreveport's modern central business district. Here they lay, right in the midst of it. In 1893, a new cemetery consisting of 70 acres and called Greenwood Cemetery was opened. Since Oakland, for all intents and purposes, was closed at that time, we have a remarkable opportunity to preserve and explore one of the few remaining and largely unchanged cemeteries of this type in the entire country. Oakland Cemetery was placed in the National Register of Historic Places on July 13th of 1977. Now, if you look at some of the pictures we posted, you'll see in the beginning of the video one picture that has a lot of notable persons that's buried at Oakland Cemetery by their name. I also was searching online and I found a report about the yellow fever epidemic of 1873 in Shreveport, Louisiana by Henry Smith, MD, medical examiner. Now, he was an actual doctor who treated some of these patients, and there's a little book that you can find online to read about it, and I'll try to copy the link and post it in the description below. And I'm just going to read just a little bit about what I found interesting in the book. So I'm skipping over all the way to about page 8, and it's under some results that he posted in his write-up in this journal. And it says, from a total of 12 insured cases, 10 of which were undoubted yellow fever, I treated for the company 6, 4 from the beginning of the attack, 1 under treatment of the family physician up to the 3rd day, and 1 abandoned relapse case, with the results of 5 recoveries and 1 death, that of Mr. Samuel Peters. The total number of deaths of insured persons were 4, all by yellow fever, 3 of whom had their family physicians in attendance of these. I saw 1 on the date of my arrival, a second 2 days afterwards, and a third later in the epidemic. All were seen but a few hours preceding death, and under circumstances which promised no hope of recovery. From the 13th of September to the 17th of November, I treated 243 cases of unequivocal yellow fever, 42 of other disease, and 3 doubtful, making a total of 288 cases by visits alone. Of this number, 236 were white and 52 colored. The adults were 216, children 72. Of the 243 cases, 31 died of the 42, with 3 doubtful. 45 of other diseases, 2 died. 1 of chronic jaundice and 1 of congestive fever. In addition to the above, I saw 38 of abandoned, neglected, or consultation cases with 21 deaths, and later having been seen, with few exemptions, from 1 to a few hours preceding dissolution, where a fatal prognosis was given and where little or no relief was to be expected from treatment of any kind. Besides, the above 55 obtained relief by prescriptions at the office of the Howard Association, among them a few lingering or imperfectly convulsant cases of yellow fever, but mostly of other diseases where the persons from pressure of circumstances could not be visited. In the above statement, I have included none of the full list of the indigent, half-starved, who presented themselves and were relieved through written orders for food, stimulants, etc. Note, for the convenience of readers, below will be found a tabulated statement of results of my experience during a period of nearly 10 weeks. Yellow fever, children 70, adults 173, total 243, deaths 31%, I believe that says 12. More than 1/2 of the cases were very severe, the patients being for several days in a critical and even dangerous situation. 6 cases were complicated with abortion, 1 of which died. 5 recovered after pure black vomit, 2 children and 3 adults. A few of the cases assumed a typical condition, the sequel of yellow fever, and 3 died from 4 to 6 weeks after the day of attack. I would be pleased to hear from the other physicians who labored zealously for the relief of stricken Shreveport, but up to the date of writing, I have seen no careful record of the disease and the results of treatment by others. I have therefore nothing to give the reader but the positive, although imperfect, results of my own observation and experience, necessarily so from the enormous labor performed, presuming the statement from my own experience during the present and past years, that as no two epidemics of yellow fever are alike, and the most prominent symptoms or effects in the one are often wanting in the other, that therefore no treatment can be laid down which it would in all cases be safe to follow. And while it becomes our duty faithfully to show what we did and the results that followed our action under certain circumstances in the treatment of this disease, as in every other, everything must depend upon the discretion and sound judgment of the attending physician. And later in his book, on the 3rd November, the epidemic being virtually at an end, the quarantines on the Texas and Pacific Railroad were raised, and the trains allowed to arrive to depart after an interval of suspension during 2 months. The total number of cases was between 2,500 and 2,600. Total number of deaths were 769. Notably, Oakland Cemetery is the final resting place for around 800 victims of the city's yellow fever epidemic of 1873. The death toll mounted so rapidly during that fateful summer that city officials did not have time to arrange for timely proper burials. A mass grave is now marked with a simple monument, but it remains one of the most visited sites in the cemetery. There's also significant cultural history told among the graves at Oakland. Jews escaping the anti-Semitism of Europe in the early 19th century came in large numbers to the south, and many settled in and around the booming Shreveport area. The Hebrew Mutual Benevolent Association purchased a tract of ground within Oakland in 1859 that became the first burial place for Jews within the city. This 1-acre plot is a reminder even today of the numbers of Jews who sought new lives and refuge in this past of the world during times of great persecution. Oakland Cemetery is the final resting place for mayors, Confederate veterans, and some Union soldiers, prominent early citizen, and even the famous Shreveport Madam Annie McCune. Bankers, lawyers, judges, and politicians can be counted among the dead resting here. In some cases, family plots contain the remains of numerous members of the same influential family, as with James Martin Foster and his family. Behind each monument or marker, there is a story that is important to Shreveport's identity. Oakland Cemetery, the oldest cemetery in Shreveport, appeared in the film Mr. Brooks starring Kevin Costner and Dane Cook. During the filming of the graveyard scene in Mr. Brooks, the city was concerned about disturbing the large grave. Therefore, the film office had a plot of land in Oakland Cemetery strictly designated for filming scenes where digging is required. It is located in the midsection on the north side.